Joining us now is the former Lake County, Illinois Sheriff Mark Curran, running against Dick Durbin as the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate. Mr. Curran, what do you think has to be in a police reform bill that is a very hot issue on Capitol Hill right now?
Well, Mike, I think that the bill introduced by Senator Scott that had police body cameras, I very much think that's a good idea. My office, when I was Lake County Sheriff, we were one of the first two offices, I believe, in the state of Illinois to apply for those body cameras. They work, they protect the officer, they protect the public. I think the reality with police agencies of any size is after a while, these officers have come through the ranks with each other and they feel a level of protection towards each other. So I think it's very important that you have internal affairs officers that come from outside of the agency, that have no connection to anyone in the agency, that aren't worried about making friends and aren't worried about, taking down somebody that they've known for 20 years.
Congresswoman Robin Kelly was telling you a few minutes ago, no teeth in the Republican bill. The Democratic House bill, she says, will have lots of teeth.
So, I don't buy into that, Mike. We've been reforming the police forever, the 21st century policing with President Obama. The reality is, when President Obama was in the Illinois State Senate, they passed a profiling bill where the police officer has to log the racial data. And as a result of that, officers are sometimes skittish to pull over too many minorities. So there's been all kinds of reform. Training has never been more. At the end of the day, police officers are human beings. Some are good, some are bad, and that's always going to be the case. You're always going to have a bad apple here or there. Ultimately, I think what we need to do is make sure that when there is an investigation, that there's an independent body that does the investigation. That's why internal affairs has to come.
Should Congress step in and preempt some of the provisions in police collective bargaining contracts, like the FOP contract in Chicago, that allows an officer for 24 hours after an incident to decline to be interviewed? FOP says that's an appropriate protection.
Yeah, I would probably agree with the FOP that, and it's a very traumatic time when an officer's involved in a shooting. He doesn't need to be grilled right at that moment. Ultimately, we'll see what comes out of this, but I think you're going to see a lot less people want to do the job of police officers. We have some bad police officers. We will always have some bad police officers, but putting the profession on trial right now is the way so many are doing for political reasons is horrible.
Let me ask you about another hot issue in the campaign. You have told me that you favor a path to permanent status for millions of immigrants who are currently here in violation of U.S. law. Why do you feel that way?
Well, when they came into this country, the borders were wide open. They threw down roots. And I don't even know where we'd send them to if we were to deport them. But the reality is, Mike, that legislation is about compromise. I want a border wall. I want border security. I want more ICE agents and Border Patrol agents. But I don't get any of that without addressing the people that have been here for some period of time. So people operate under a false assumption that somehow they're going to get all those things, and then they don't have to do anything good for the people that have been here forever.
The difference between you and Dick Durbin on abortion is what? You would pass a law banning abortion?
Okay, so Mike, there's no will, for that right now, nationally. But I am certainly pro-life. I'm unabashedly pro-life. I have love for the infant in the womb as well. And what would a bill look like that or anything else like that? That's just so far down the road. It's not a pressing issue, obviously, before Congress or the courts.
Of course, in some states, it's being abolished gradually, incrementally, but although not here in Illinois. You would support those efforts? I think Missouri only has a handful or even one or two clinics left where it's done. Does that would be your ultimate goal, to get rid of
protect all life clinics? To protect all life, Mike. But I think, if you follow me, I have a consistent ethic of life. I've been against the death penalty. I'm somebody that recognizes that the poor and the marginalized in society are also, that's also something that need protection in a consistent ethic of life. When you look at our economic system, 1% of America has more wealth than the bottom 90%. 3 Americans have more wealth than the bottom 50%. We sent all these jobs overseas. We killed all the good paying American jobs so that people with these global and multinational corporations could get filthy rich and the American worker could get hit in the back. Ultimately, there's a lot of anger out there as to what's happened with America and how do we get it back. Envy is driving it on one side.
You've proposed an asset tax that Elizabeth Warren in the Democratic president's primaries supported, 2% on everything over $50 million net worth, and then 6% on billionaires on their net assets.
So my proposal was not hers; it was my own. So it was 1% on $50 million and 6% on $1 billion. I'm not married to that proposal. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the only way to do things, and that may not be the right suggestion. But at the end of the day,
what's your goal with it?
At the end of the day, the middle class is getting killed, Mike, and we need to get ultimately, we have a $26 trillion debt. China owns America. The elites have told us forever, Mike, that cut taxes and everything will be great. Well, what did that cutting in taxes do? Even this last cycle with the big tax cuts, we had a $1 trillion deficit. And that was even before the coronavirus. So we're running up these huge debts and deficits. And if you have a ton of money, Mike, it doesn't matter. When you're a middle class guy or you're a patriot, you recognize that America's national security is at stake. You recognize that generational theft is not right, not to leave the country to your children and grandchildren worse off. So ultimately, everybody has a responsibility. The very wealthy have written the rules of the tax code, the wealthy people and the wealthy corporations. And ultimately, we need to get back to worrying about the middle class, because if the middle class dies, America is on its last breath.
We'll be right back after this break.